The Apache Mountains held many secrets, but none as unexpected as the love story that would unfold on that blood-soaked morning. Sarah Calloway, her wedding dress stained with dirt and tears, stumbled into forbidden territory after outlaws massacred her wedding party. When the feared Apache warrior found her, death seemed certain. Instead, he lifted her onto his horse and carried her to his village. His people watched in disbelief. Outsiders were killed, not rescued. Standing before his tribe, the battle-scarred warrior studied her face, his expression unreadable. "I haven't seen a woman in a decade," he declared before claiming her as his bride. Could a woman who lost everything find love with a man who'd forgotten how to feel? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Calloway had never imagined herself here, running barefoot through wilderness. Her once pristine wedding gown, now torn and stained with the blood of those who'd accompanied her west. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd been standing in her father's Boston townhouse, staring at a daguerreotype of Mr. Edward Thornton, the frontier businessman who would become her husband. "He has prospects." "Sarah," her father had explained, his voice gentle but firm, "with your mother gone and my business struggling, this match is our salvation." She'd nodded dutifully, packed her trunks, and boarded the train west with Reverend Phillips and his wife as her chaperones. The journey had been long but uneventful until they reached the territorial outpost, where Mr. Thornton's men were to meet them with wagons for the final leg. "He sends his regrets." "Miss Calloway," the wagon master had said, handing her a letter. "Business in Santa Fe couldn't wait, but he'll meet you at Fort Laramie for the ceremony." The letter held pretty words about anticipation and future. Happiness, words that meant nothing now as Sarah clutched her charred music box and listened for sounds of pursuit. 3 days ago, the small wagon train had made camp in a sheltered valley. She'd been awake before dawn, nervous about meeting her betrothed, when the first shots rang out. From beneath the wagon where she'd crawled, Sarah had watched in horror as masked men slaughtered everyone, the guards, the Reverend and his wife, the wagon master and his son. They'd been after the strongbox and supplies, not bothering with the sobbing bride until one noticed her hiding place. "Well now, look what we have here. A wedding present," he'd laughed, reaching for her ankle. In that moment, some primal instinct took over. Sarah had grabbed a fallen pistol, fired wildly, and run when the man fell backward, clutching his shoulder. She'd fled into the dawn, the shouting and gunfire eventually fading behind her. For 3 days, she'd followed a stream upward, hoping to find higher ground, a settlement, a patrol, anything. Her silk slippers had disintegrated on the first day. Hunger clawed at her stomach. The only possession she'd managed to grab was her mother's music box, now damaged from the fire they'd set to the wagons. When night fell, Sarah huddled beneath rocky overhangs or in hollow logs, shivering as mountain predators called in the darkness. Boston hadn't prepared her for this savage country. She'd been raised to pour tea, play piano, and manage household staff, not to survive wilderness. Yet somehow she kept moving, driven by a stubborn will she hadn't known she possessed. On the 4th morning, delirious with hunger and thirst, Sarah stumbled upon fresh tracks, a horse or large deer, and followed them desperately. The path grew steeper, the air thinner. Strange rock formations appeared, unlike anything she'd seen before. The feeling of being watched prickled along her spine. Pausing to catch her breath, Sarah opened her music box. The tiny ballerina inside was blackened, the mechanism damaged, but when she gently turned the key, a few haunting notes of Chopin still played. The familiar melody brought tears to her eyes, a fragment of civilization in this merciless wilderness. "Who are you to be in this place?" The deep voice froze her blood. Sarah slowly raised her head to find herself staring at the most fearsome man she'd ever seen. Tall and powerfully built, with raven-black hair flowing past his shoulders, he sat atop a paint stallion regarding her with fathomless dark eyes. His copper skin was adorned with faded war paint, and the knife at his belt gleamed in the morning sun, an Apache warrior. Sarah had heard the whispered stories in the outpost of scalping, torture, villages burned. Her legs trembled beneath her as she clutched the music box to her chest like a shield. "Please," she whispered, though she knew he likely wouldn't understand. "Please." The warrior's face remained impassive as he assessed her, the torn wedding dress, the bruises and scratches, the terror in her eyes. After what seemed an eternity, he dismounted in one fluid motion and approached. Sarah wanted to run, but found herself rooted to the ground, mesmerized by his deliberate movements and unwavering gaze. He stopped an arm's length away, towering over her. Then, to her astonishment, he extended his hand, palm up. "You come," he said in accented English, "or you die here." Dakota had not planned to find a white woman today. His morning ritual remained unchanged for a decade. Rise before dawn, bathe in the icy stream, pray to the ancestors, then patrol the boundaries of what he considered his territory. Not Apache land as recognized by the tribal council, but his own chosen isolation. A self-imposed exile that the elders reluctantly accepted after what happened to his family. The tracks had caught his attention immediately, small, stumbling footprints, unlike the usual deer or elk. Someone desperately lost, moving without purpose. Curious rather than concerned, he'd followed them, expecting perhaps a lost child from the village or a separated hunter from a neighboring tribe. Instead, he found her, a pale woman in a strange white dress, now stained with dirt and blood. A ghost from another world. Dakota had watched her for several minutes before revealing himself. She clutched a small box that played spirit music, her blue eyes clouded with exhaustion and fear. Her appearance stirred memories he'd buried long ago, of another time when worlds collided and blood stained the ground. "You come," he told her now, hand extended. "Or you die here." He saw the terror in her eyes, understood she expected torture or worse. The stories whites told about his people were as distorted as those his people told about whites. Truth existed somewhere between the extremes. He had learned this at great personal cost. When she placed her trembling hand in his, Dakota nodded once and led her to his horse. He lifted her onto the paint stallion's back as effortlessly as he might a child, then mounted behind her. She stiffened at his proximity, but made no sound as they began the journey back to the village. The morning sun painted the canyons in amber light as they rode, revealing the stark beauty of the landscape Dakota had chosen as his sanctuary. Far from the settled territories and army patrols, these mountains offered solitude and safety until now. Why? Her voice was barely audible, the first word she'd spoken since their departure. Dakota considered ignoring her question. 10 years of minimal human contact had left his command of English fragmented, and speaking it felt like reopening a wound. But something about her quiet dignity, despite her circumstances, compelled him to answer. "Winter comes," he said simply. "The mountain has no mercy." He felt her processing his words, weighing their implications. Survival, not kindness, motivated his intervention. Yet even this pragmatic explanation wasn't entirely true. Something deeper had stayed his hand, something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. As they approached the village outskirts, Dakota reached for his scarred flute, secured beneath his leather vest. The familiar texture of the old wood against his fingertips steadied him. 10 years ago, in a rage of grief, he had taken his knife to it, intending to destroy this gift from his wife. But he couldn't complete the act. And now the instrument carried his scars as surely as his heart did. The first dwellings came into view, conical structures of wooden poles covered with animal hides and woven mats. Women tended cooking fires, while children practiced with small bows. An ordinary morning about to become extraordinary. A boy spotted them first, dropping the rabbit he'd been skinning to stare openly at the white woman. Then he ran, shouting an alarm that rippled through the village like a stone thrown into still water. By the time Dakota reached the central clearing, a crowd had gathered, faces registering shock and anger. Walking Thunder, the eldest of the tribal council, stepped forward. His weathered face creased with displeasure as he addressed Takoda in their native tongue. "You bring death to us, lone wolf?" he asked, using the name Takoda had earned during his decade of solitude. "The soldiers will come when they find one of their women missing." Takoda dismounted, then helped the trembling bride down. She stood close to him, clearly recognizing him as her only protection among strangers. "She was already dead," Takoda replied in Apache. "I found her where the carrion birds gather. Her people are gone." Walking Thunder's eyes narrowed. "Then she should have joined them. You know our laws." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. No outsider who discovered their location could leave to tell of it. A harsh necessity born from generations of betrayal and bloodshed. "I will speak for her," Takoda said, his voice hardening. "Before the council." His hand unconsciously moved to the scarred flute beneath his vest, a reminder of all he had lost and the emptiness that followed. He looked down at the pale woman in her strange white dress, her blue eyes wide with incomprehension as she watched the exchange she couldn't understand. For the first time in 10 years, Takoda felt something stir within his chest, something he thought had died with his family. It was the awakening of possibility. Dawn found Sarah alone in Takoda's dwelling, a circular wickiup of bent saplings covered with woven mats and hides. Her husband had disappeared before first light, leaving her with a small fire, a water jug, and bewildering uncertainty. She examined the dwelling in morning light, surprisingly spacious, with a smoke hole at its apex. The structure contained minimal possessions, sleeping furs, cooking implements, weapons carefully arranged on a rack, and bundles of herbs hanging from the framework. Everything functional, nothing frivolous, like the man himself. Last night, after the ceremony, Takoda had led her here in silence. He'd indicated where she should sleep, then made his own bed on the opposite side of the fire. No consummation, no conversation. Just the crackling flames between them until she'd finally fallen into exhausted slumber. Sarah reached for the clay water jug, its surface decorated with geometric patterns and animal symbols. As she tilted it to drink, a hairline crack sent water streaming down her arm. She set it down hastily, watching the precious liquid seep into the dirt floor. Wasteful. She startled at the voice. An elderly woman, mourning dove from the council, stood in the doorway, observing with sharp eyes. "I'm sorry," Sarah said automatically, though she doubted the woman understood English. "It's cracked." To her surprise, Mourning Dove nodded. "Broken, not useless," she replied in halting English. "Come." Curiosity overcoming caution, Sarah followed the elder outside. The village bustled with morning activity. Women grinding corn, children tending small gardens, men repairing weapons and tools. All paused to stare as she passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Mourning Dove led her to a cooking fire where several women worked. With curt instructions and demonstrative gestures, she showed Sarah how to mix pine resin and ash into a paste, then seal the cracked water jug. The other women maintained their distance, whispering among themselves. "They fear you bring death," Mourning Dove explained, noticing Sarah's awareness of their scrutiny. "Soldiers follow white women," Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No one is looking for me. They all died in the attack." The old woman studied her face, then nodded slightly. "Perhaps. But white men's memories are long when they choose." As the morning progressed, Mourning Dove introduced Sarah to basic tasks. Grinding corn, preparing a stew of unfamiliar ingredients, tending the fire. The work was harder than it looked, blistering Sarah's soft hands and straining muscles unused to such labor. Yet she welcomed it, grateful for guidance in this alien world. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked as they worked. "The others avoid me." Mourning Dove's weathered face remained impassive. "I see visions." "You walk between worlds," she tapped her chest. "Two hearts beat here, Apache and white. Like you now." Before Sarah could question further, shouting erupted nearby. A group of young warriors had returned from hunting, led by Black Fox from the council. They carried a deer carcass, but their attention focused immediately on Sarah. Black Fox approached, addressing her in Apache with undisguised contempt. He asks if Dakota's pale wife expects to eat what Apache hunters provide, Mourning Dove translated. Her tone neutral. Sarah straightened her spine, looking directly at the hostile warrior. "Tell him I will earn my place," she replied, holding up her blistered hands as evidence of her day's labor. Mourning Dove conveyed her words, adding something that made several onlookers chuckle. Black Fox's expression darkened. He spat near Sarah's feet before stalking away, taking his followers with him. "What did you say to him?" Sarah asked. A ghost of a smile touched the old woman's lips. "That Dakota chose well, a woman with fire in her blood." The commotion had drawn others, including several children who now openly stared at Sarah. One small boy, bolder than the rest, approached and touched her pale arm, then darted away giggling. "Children adapt quickly," Mourning Dove observed. "Elders never. Your path lies with those between." As afternoon stretched toward evening, Sarah returned to Dakota's dwelling with her repaired water jug and new knowledge. She rekindled the fire and set about preparing a simple meal from what Mourning Dove had given her. The sound of approaching footsteps made her heart quicken. Dakota ducked through the entrance, his expression unreadable as he surveyed her efforts. He carried freshly killed rabbits, which he set beside the fire without comment. They worked in silence, he skinning the rabbits, she tending the cooking pot. The domesticity felt surreal after everything that had happened. When the meal was ready, Sarah filled 2 clay bowls, offering one to Dakota. He accepted it with a nod, studying her across the fire as they ate. "You did not run," he observed finally. "Where would I go?" she countered. "Besides, Mourning Dove helped me today." Dakota nodded slightly. "She believes you have purpose here. And you?" Sarah dared to ask. "What do you believe?" He considered her question, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I believe the mountain spirits do nothing without reason," he said finally. "Even bringing a white woman to my path, it wasn't much, but it was something. An acknowledgement that perhaps her presence wasn't merely a burden, but part of some greater design." That night, as she lay on her sleeping furs, listening to Dakota's steady breathing across the fire, Sarah clutched the repaired water jug close to her chest, broken, not useless. Perhaps the same could be true of her life. Hold it like this. Dakota adjusted Sarah's grip on the bow for the 3rd time that morning. Fingers loose but firm. 2 weeks had passed since the council's judgment. Each day followed a similar pattern. Sarah learning Apache ways under Mourning Dove's guidance during the day, then awkward evenings with Dakota, punctuated by minimal conversation and separate sleeping arrangements. Today marked a departure from that routine. Dakota had appeared at dawn, presenting her with a small bow and declaring it time she learned to hunt. "I can't do this," Sarah protested, her arm trembling from holding the bow drawn. The arrow wobbled, pointing nowhere near the tree trunk serving as her target. "You must," he replied simply. "Winter approaches. Everyone hunts, everyone works." Sarah released the bowstring with a frustrated sigh. The arrow fell pathetically short of the target. Sweat trickled between her shoulder blades despite the cool morning air. "My arms aren't strong enough." Dakota retrieved the arrow, his expression neutral. "They become strong with practice." He pressed something into her palm. "For you." "I made it." Sarah examined the perfect obsidian arrowhead in her hand, its edges gleaming in the morning light. Unlike her crude practice arrows with blunted tips, this was a true hunting point, deadly sharp and beautifully crafted. "It's too fine for me to use," she said, genuinely appreciative of its craftsmanship. "Not for practice," Dakota clarified. "For when you are ready. Every hunter needs proper tools," he paused, adding, "and proper motivation." He gestured toward the village, where Black Fox stood watching them with undisguised contempt. "He believes you will always be burden." Prove him wrong. Something shifted in Sarah's chest, a flicker of determination. She knocked another arrow, drew the bow despite her screaming muscles, and focused on the target. This time, the arrow flew straighter, grazing the edge of the trunk. Better, Dakota acknowledged, the faintest approval warming his voice. They practiced until midday, when Dakota led her deeper into the forest to gather herbs and check his snares. Sarah watched carefully as he identified medicinal plants, explaining their uses in his limited English. His knowledge of the natural world impressed her. Everything had purpose, nothing wasted. "Why did you live alone?" she asked as they walked, curiosity finally overcoming caution. "Before you found me." Dakota continued walking for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Death followed me," he said finally. "I chose solitude to protect my people." "From what?" His expression darkened. "From what I became after losing my family." Before she could ask more, Dakota raised his hand for silence. He pointed to a clearing ahead where a young deer grazed, unaware of their presence. "Watch," he whispered, knocking an arrow to his own bow. With fluid grace, he drew, aimed, and released in one continuous motion. The deer dropped instantly, the arrow finding its heart. "Clean kill. No suffering," he explained as they approached the fallen animal. "This is the hunter's responsibility." Sarah expected him to carry the deer back to the village. Instead, Dakota handed her his knife. "You must learn all parts of hunting," he said. "Not just killing, but honoring the life taken to sustain ours." Under his guidance, Sarah helped dress the deer, fighting nausea as she learned where to cut, what to save, how to use every part of the animal. Blood covered her hands, soaked into the deerskin dress she now wore instead of her wedding gown. The physical reality of survival stripped away any remaining delicacy from her Boston upbringing. As they worked, Dakota spoke more than he had in all their previous days combined, explaining Apache beliefs about the sacred relationship between hunter and prey. His voice took on a different quality when discussing these traditions, reverent, almost gentle. "The deer gives itself so we may live," he told her. "We honor that gift by wasting nothing." When they finally returned to the village, Sarah walked beside Dakota, carrying a portion of their hunt. The weight strained her shoulders, but she refused to complain. Black Fox and his followers watched their approach, their expressions shifting from scorn to grudging surprise when they saw her blood-covered arms and the meat she carried. "You did well today," Dakota said quietly as they neared his dwelling. The simple praise warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you for teaching me." That evening, as they shared the meal prepared from their hunt, the usual silence between them felt different, comfortable rather than strained. Sarah fingered the obsidian arrowhead she now wore on a leather cord around her neck, a tangible reminder of the day's small victory. "Tomorrow we continue," Dakota said as the fire burned low. "You have much still to learn." "I'm ready," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze across the flames. Something flickered in his dark eyes, not quite a smile, but perhaps the beginning of respect. Later, as she drifted toward sleep, Sarah realized the day had passed without her once thinking of Boston or her former life. Instead, her mind filled with practical concerns, improving her bow skills, identifying plants, preparing for winter. Survival was becoming its own purpose, and somehow that seemed enough for now. The first snow fell 3 months after Sarah's arrival among the Apache. She woke to find the world transformed, the familiar landscape now blanketed in pristine white. The morning unusually quiet as the snow dampened all sound. "Beautiful," she whispered. Standing in the dwelling's doorway, Dakota appeared beside her, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Beautiful but dangerous," he corrected. "Winter in the mountains shows no mercy." In the months since her arrival, much had changed. Sarah's body had grown lean and strong from daily work. Her skin had darkened from constant exposure to the sun, and her hands had calloused from labor. She spoke basic Apache phrases now and understood far more. But the most significant change lay in her relationship with Dakota. The careful distance between them had gradually diminished. They still slept separately, but their conversations had deepened, particularly during evening hours by the fire. She had learned fragments of his past, his marriage to a woman named Swift Deer, their young son, the raid by Mexican soldiers that had taken them while Dakota was away hunting. "The snow makes me think of Boston winters," Sarah admitted as they walked toward the village center. Though we had fireplaces and wool blankets rather than buffalo robes, Dakota glanced at her. "You miss this Boston?" The question surprised her. Dakota rarely inquired about her past. "I miss certain comforts," she answered honestly. "But not as much as I would have expected." They parted ways at the central clearing, Dakota joining the hunters, Sarah heading toward Mourning Dove's dwelling, where the women gathered to work on winter preparations. She'd found unexpected friendship with the old medicine woman whose visions had somehow prepared her for Sarah's arrival. "Ah, the pale one comes." Mourning Dove greeted her with a rare smile. "Today I have something for you." The elder woman reached into a painted parfleche bag and withdrew a pair of moccasins. Unlike the plain, functional pair Sarah had been given upon arrival, these were works of art. Soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. "These are beautiful," Sarah gasped, running her fingers over the delicate beadwork. "For you," Mourning Dove said, "made by my hands, for the path you walk." The other women watched with mixed expressions as Sarah removed her worn moccasins and slipped on the new pair. The gift was significant, a public acknowledgement of acceptance from a respected elder. "Thank you," Sarah said, the Apache words coming naturally now. "I am honored." Mourning Dove nodded, then gestured for Sarah to join the circle of women working on processing the last of the autumn's harvest. As they worked, the conversation flowed around her, much of it still beyond her comprehension, but no longer excluding her entirely. "Your man hunts with others now," observed Singing Bird, a young mother who had gradually warmed to Sarah. "Not alone as before you came." Sarah's hands stilled momentarily. It was true. Dakota had begun participating in communal hunts rather than always hunting alone. The change had been so gradual, she hadn't fully registered its significance. "He changes," Mourning Dove agreed, her wise eyes studying Sarah. "As do you." Later that day, Sarah stood at the edge of the village, watching the hunting parties return. The men carried several elk, a successful hunt that would provide meat for many days. Dakota walked among them, not quite part of their camaraderie, but no longer apart either. His eyes found hers immediately, as they always seemed to now. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement before continuing toward the area where the meat would be processed. "The Alpha returns to his pack." Black Fox's mocking voice came from behind her. Though his open hostility had diminished, his resentment remained palpable. Sarah turned, meeting his gaze steadily. Months of hard work had earned her the right to stand her ground. "Even with him, we are stronger together than alone," she replied in Apache. The phrase "one" Dakota had taught her. Black Fox's eyes narrowed at her use of their language. "You speak our words, wear our clothes, but your blood remains white," he said. "Remember that when your people come looking for you." The ominous warning lingered as he walked away. Sarah shivered, though not from the cold. Black Fox's persistent belief that her presence would bring danger had begun to feel less like bitterness and more like foreboding. That evening, as snow continued to fall outside, Sarah and Dakota shared a quiet meal in their dwelling. The warmth of the fire and the rich stew created a cocoon of comfort against the winter night. "Mourning Dove gave me these," Sarah said, extending her foot to show the beaded moccasins. Dakota examined them, genuine appreciation in his expression. "Her finest work, a great honor." "Why would she honor me?" Sarah asked. "I'm still an outsider." "Not to her," Dakota replied. "She sees what might be, not just what is." His gaze held hers across the fire, longer than usual, with an intensity that made her heart quicken. When he finally looked away, Sarah found herself strangely disappointed. "The winter will be harsh," he said, returning to practical matters. "We must prepare more firewood tomorrow." Sarah nodded, recognizing the shift back to their usual dynamic. Yet something had changed, however briefly, a moment of connection that lingered like an unspoken question. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the old world beneath the promise of the new. Winter deepened, burying the Apache village in snow and confining its inhabitants to close quarters. January brought bitter cold that penetrated even the well-insulated dwellings. Sarah had never imagined such cold, a living presence that hunted for any exposed skin, that transformed breath to ice crystals, that made survival itself an act of defiance. Yet within this harsh season, she found unexpected warmth. The tribe had developed a rhythm of winter life, storytelling around fires, crafting weapons and tools, teaching children tribal history and skills. Sarah now participated in these activities, her presence no longer causing the ripple of discomfort it once had. This evening, the tribe had gathered in the council lodge for a feast celebrating the winter solstice. The spacious structure accommodated nearly everyone, with several fires providing warmth and light. Sarah sat beside Morning Dove, watching as tribal elders performed a blessing ceremony over the gathered food. Harding's expression softened slightly. "Your fiancé sent us, ma'am. Edward Thornton has been relentless in his search for you. Offered rewards, petitioned the governor, even funded our expedition when the army was reluctant to spare men for what seemed a hopeless cause." Sarah's breath caught. Edward, the man she'd been traveling to marry, whom she'd never even met, had been searching all this time. "He must be quite devoted," she said carefully. "Indeed." Harding reached into his pocket again, withdrawing the silver watch. "He asked me to give you this if we found you. It belonged to your father," he said. "Mr. Thornton purchased it from your father's estate to return to you as a wedding gift." Sarah accepted the watch with trembling hands. The familiar monogram confirmed its authenticity, her father's prized possession that she thought lost forever. "How did Mr. Thornton acquire this?" she asked, a chill unrelated to the winter cold settling over her. "As I said, from your father's estate sale," Harding replied. "After his passing," Sarah's head snapped up. "My father is dead." Confusion crossed the lieutenant's face. "Yes, ma'am?" "Succumbed to heart failure shortly after your departure for the frontier." "I assumed you knew." "No," Sarah whispered, the world tilting beneath her. "I was told he was in good health, that he arranged my marriage to secure our future." An uncomfortable silence filled the lodge as Sarah's fingers traced the watch's engraving. The pieces weren't fitting together. Her father's death, Edward Thornton's possession of family heirlooms, his desperate search for a woman he'd never met. "Lieutenant," she said finally, her voice steadier, "I appreciate your concern, but I need time to consider my situation. Would you return tomorrow for my answer?" Walking Thunder and Takoda exchanged glances before the elder nodded. "The lieutenant may return at midday tomorrow, alone." As Harding was escorted back to his horse, Sarah remained in the council lodge, the silver watch heavy in her palm. Takoda approached cautiously, studying her expression. "Your father's?" he asked, gesturing to the timepiece. Sarah nodded, opening the case to reveal the inscription inside, "To William Calloway, for services to Thornton Enterprises." "Something isn't right," she murmured. "My father never worked for the Thorntons. They were rivals in Boston shipping." Takoda's expression darkened. "White men's business often hides many lies." "Yes," Sarah agreed, closing the watch with a decisive snap. "And I intend to discover what this one is hiding before I make any decision." She met Takoda's gaze directly, seeing the question he wouldn't voice. "I'm not leaving," she assured him. "At least not yet. Not until I understand what's really happening." Relief flickered briefly across his features before his warrior's mask returned. "Then we prepare," he said simply, "for whatever tomorrow brings." Snow crunched under Sarah's moccasins as she walked to the designated meeting place, a small clearing just beyond the village perimeter. The morning sun sparkled on the pristine white landscape, creating a deceptive serenity that belied the tension in the air. She had dressed carefully for this encounter, choosing the simplest of her Apache clothing, but wearing her father's pocket watch openly around her neck. Her hair remained braided in the tribal style, a deliberate statement of her current identity. Takoda had objected to her plan until dawn, his concern manifesting as anger. Their final exchange before she left still echoed in her mind. "If you do not return by midday, I will come for you," he had warned, checking his weapons. "I will return," she had promised, then added impulsively, "I have found my home here." To Coda, something had shifted. In his expression at her words, surprise giving way to an emotion she couldn't name before his warrior's mask. "Returned, then fight to protect it," he'd replied simply. Now, as Lieutenant Harding rode into view, Sarah straightened her spine and composed her features into what she hoped was an expression of relieved anticipation. The officer dismounted quickly, removing his hat as he approached her. "Miss Calloway," he greeted her warmly. "I'm pleased to see you well. Are you alone?" "As requested," Sarah replied, ignoring the prickling awareness that Apache eyes watched from concealed positions around the clearing. Though the tribe was reluctant to allow it, Harding nodded sympathetically. "Captors rarely relinquish their prizes willingly. Is that what I am, Lieutenant?" "A prize?" His smile faltered slightly. "A survivor, Miss Calloway, one whom many have searched for at great expense." Sarah fingered her father's watch deliberately. "Yes, this timepiece suggests Mr. Thornton has gone to considerable trouble. He'll be overjoyed to learn of your safety," Harding assured her. "We can depart immediately if you're ready. My men are prepared to escort you to Fort Laramie, where Mr. Thornton awaits." The revelation that Edward Thornton was so near sent a chill through Sarah. "He traveled personally to meet me?" "Indeed, your fiancé has been stationed at the fort for months, coordinating search parties and negotiating with local tribes for information." Harding's admiration seemed genuine. Few men would show such devotion, or such desperation, Sarah thought grimly. "It sounds as though I'm greatly indebted to him," she said carefully. "And to you, Lieutenant. Tell me, how did you locate me after all this time?" Harding shifted his weight, snow creaking beneath his boots. "We've been following reports of a white woman among the Apache for weeks. A trapper claimed to have glimpsed you during a trading exchange." "Remarkable persistence," Sarah observed, "especially during winter conditions. Mr. Thornton was most insistent the search continue regardless of season." Harding reached into his coat pocket. He provided substantial incentive for the men. The lieutenant withdrew a small metal mirror, standard cavalry equipment for signaling. As he absently turned it in his hands, flashes of reflected sunlight bounced across the snow. "Lieutenant," Sarah asked, eyeing the mirror, "are your men expecting a signal today?" His expression remained neutral, but his fingers stilled. "Standard procedure, Miss Calloway. They'll expect confirmation of your safety." "Of course," she nodded. "And what signal would indicate danger? 3 flashes, perhaps? Or a continuous reflection?" Harding's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem to know military protocols, Miss Calloway." "My father shipped supplies to the army for years," she replied smoothly. "I find military matters fascinating. For instance, I wonder why a rescue party of 8 men carries enough ammunition for a company. We noticed your saddlebags were quite heavily loaded." The lieutenant's friendly demeanor cooled noticeably. "Frontier travel requires preparation, especially in hostile territory." "Indeed. One must be prepared for all possibilities." Sarah took a deliberate step backward. "Including the possibility that I might decline Mr. Thornton's rescue." Confusion crossed Harding's face. "Decline? Miss Calloway, perhaps you don't understand your situation." "These savages took me in when I was dying," Sarah interrupted. "Taught me to survive. Protected me through winter. Under duress," Harding insisted. "Whatever Stockholm sympathies you've developed, what I've developed, Lieutenant, is clarity." Sarah pulled the newspaper clipping from inside her dress, holding it up. "Especially about Mr. Thornton's business interests." Harding's expression hardened as he recognized the article. "Where did you get that?" "Your saddlebag wasn't properly secured," she replied. "Tell me, Lieutenant, does Edward Thornton need me alive to claim those European contracts, or would proof of death suffice?" The pretense of rescue vanished from Harding's demeanor. He straightened, hand moving subtly toward his holstered pistol. "Mr. Thornton would prefer you alive, Miss Calloway. But he's a practical businessman. And you?" Sarah asked, continuing her careful retreat. "What were your orders if I proved—" Uncooperative? Harding raised the signal mirror, angling it to catch the sun. My orders were to recover you by any means necessary. If the Apache village suffered casualties in the process, well, that would simply be justice for their many depredations against settlers. I suspected as much, Sarah said, her back now nearly at the tree line. Thank you for confirming your intentions, Lieutenant. Confusion crossed Harding's face as he realized she was withdrawing rather than accompanying him. Miss Calloway, you cannot seriously prefer remaining with these... My husband, Sarah interrupted firmly, and his people. The lieutenant's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. He began to flash the mirror in a deliberate pattern. An arrow thudded into the snow at his feet. Harding froze, slowly turning to find Takoda and 5 warriors emerging from the trees, bows drawn and aimed. Your men will not see that signal, Takoda stated coldly. They are currently occupied with visitors of their own. Harding's hand moved toward his pistol. I wouldn't, Sarah warned. Apache arrows fly faster than you can draw. For a tense moment, the lieutenant seemed to calculate his odds. Then, with visible restraint, he lowered his hand. This isn't over, he said bitterly. Thornton won't stop searching. Then he should be prepared for disappointment, Sarah replied, moving to stand beside Takoda. My father's legacy isn't his to claim, nor am I. As Takoda's warriors surrounded the lieutenant, Sarah felt a strange sense of resolution. For the first time since the wagon train attack, she had actively chosen her path rather than merely surviving the one thrust upon her. She glanced at Takoda beside her, finding his eyes already on her face, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper that made her heart quicken. They had weathered the first storm together, but both knew darker clouds gathered on the horizon. He will return with more men, Black Fox stated flatly. The tribal council had gathered immediately after Lieutenant Harding's departure, under escort, to rejoin his patrol. This Thornton will not surrender what he believes is his property. Sarah flinched at being referred to as property, but couldn't dispute the assessment. The lieutenant's parting words had made Thornton's determination clear. How many soldiers at this Fort Laramie? Walking Thunder asked, addressing Takoda. Perhaps 50, Takoda answered, with cannon and supplies. Too many to fight directly? The elders exchanged grave looks. Every Apache present understood the implications. A military force that size could obliterate their village, especially with artillery. We should move deeper into the mountains, suggested one elder. To the summer hunting grounds? In winter? Black Fox scoffed. The old ones and children would not survive the journey through deep snow, and they would follow, Sarah added quietly. All eyes turned to her. Thornton has invested too much to abandon the search now. Walking Thunder studied her thoughtfully. You know this white man's mind. What will he do next? Sarah considered the question carefully, drawing on her knowledge of Boston business tactics and Thornton's apparent character. He'll escalate gradually, she concluded. First with threats and displays of force, hoping to intimidate you into surrendering me. If that fails, he'll likely attempt to negotiate, offering trade goods or weapons as compensation. And if that fails, Morning Dove prompted. Sarah met the old woman's eyes steadily. Then he'll attack, claiming he's rescuing a captive and punishing hostiles. The army would support such action, especially if he falsifies reports of Apache aggression. The council lodge fell silent as her words sank in. After a moment, Walking Thunder rose and approached a sacred bundle kept at the back of the lodge. With ceremonial solemnity, he unwrapped the contents, revealing an ancient circular shield made of thick buffalo hide. Its surface decorated with faded paint and medicine symbols. The war shield of many horses, he announced, holding it reverently. Carried by our greatest war chief 5 generations ago, when the Spanish came with similar intentions. The shield's presence electrified the gathering. Sarah could feel the shift in energy, from defensive concern to resolute determination. We prepare for all possibilities, Walking Thunder declared. We will not surrender our own, nor will we seek conflict. But if war comes to our mountains, we will meet it as our ancestors did. Black Fox stepped forward eagerly. I will lead the younger warriors in preparing defenses, and I will coordinate with allied tribes, offered another council member. The Crow and Shoshone also have reason to fear increased military presence. As the council dispersed with purpose, Sarah remained seated, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. These people were willing to risk everything to protect her, not out of obligation to Takoda, but because she had become one of them. "You are troubled," Takoda observed, sitting beside her as the others left. "People may die because of me," she said softly. "Because of choices made by my father and Thornton that had nothing to do with this tribe." Takoda was silent for a moment, his hand resting near hers without quite touching. "Our people have faced such threats since before I was born," he finally said. "With or without you, the whites push further into our lands each season. But my presence accelerates the conflict," Sarah persisted. "Perhaps if I went to Fort Laramie, negotiated directly with Thornton—" "No." Takoda's response was immediate and firm. He turned to face her directly. "You said yourself he wants either your signature or your death. If you go to him, which do you believe he would prefer? A living woman who could later challenge his claims, or a convenient tragedy?" Sarah swallowed hard, knowing Takoda was right. Edward Thornton had invested too much to risk her interfering with his plans. "Then what alternative do we have?" she asked. "We fight," Takoda said simply. "Not with arrows against cannon, that would be foolish. We fight with knowledge, with strategy." He gestured toward the war shield that Walking Thunder had left displayed on its stand. "Our ancestors did not survive by always meeting strength with strength, but by understanding when to strike and when to disappear like mist." His words triggered a realization in Sarah. "The contracts," she said suddenly. "The European shipping agreements Thornton wants. They would have specific requirements, deadlines, penalties for non-fulfillment." "Meaning?" Takoda prompted. "Meaning Thornton's urgency suggests a timeline. He needs either me or proof of my death by a certain date, or those agreements become void." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. "We don't need to defeat him militarily, just outlast his deadline." Interest sparked in Takoda's eyes. "How long?" "I don't know exactly," Sarah admitted. "But European shipping contracts typically operate on quarterly schedules. If my father died 6 months ago, and Thornton has been searching for 4 months, then his deadline approaches," Takoda concluded. "This explains his winter expedition." For the first time since the lieutenant's arrival, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. "We need more information about these contracts and Thornton's deadline. The lieutenant might know," Takoda suggested, though he would not willingly share such details. Sarah considered this, remembering the lieutenant's military bearing and professional pride. Perhaps not willingly, but he might reveal something if properly encouraged. Takoda studied her thoughtfully. "You have a plan?" "The beginning of one," Sarah acknowledged, "but it will require help from Black Fox." Surprise flickered across Takoda's face. "You trust him?" "I trust his intelligence and his desire to protect the tribe," she replied carefully. "And for this, we need someone who thinks like a hunter." As they left the council lodge together, Sarah glanced back at the ancient war shield, gleaming dully in the firelight. For generations, it had protected the tribe against threats from outside, Spanish, Mexican, American. Now it would stand against a Boston businessman whose greed had followed her across a continent. And somehow, despite the danger ahead, Sarah found herself strangely at peace. This was no longer a fight for survival, but a battle for the home and people she had chosen. 3 days after Lieutenant Harding's departure, the scouts reported 20 mounted soldiers approaching from the south, led by a civilian in a long coat. Sarah knew without being told Edward Thornton had come personally. "They bring a wagon with supplies," Snowhawk reported to the gathered warriors, "and something covered beneath canvas. Perhaps cannon." Takoda absorbed this information with the stillness of a predator assessing prey. "They camp at the valley entrance?" "Yes," the young scout confirmed. "They clear snow, build fortifications. Not leaving soon. The Apache forces had been prepared for this escalation. Under Black Fox's direction, the tribe had constructed hidden defensive positions around the village perimeter. The most vulnerable, children, elderly, and those too ill to fight, had been moved to caves higher in the mountains with provisions and guards. "They wait for us to approach," Black Fox observed. "Thinking fear will drive us to negotiate," Dakota nodded. "A patient enemy is more dangerous than an angry one." Sarah studied the rough map the scouts had drawn in the dirt. "They've positioned themselves at the primary access route to the village." "Are there other paths?" "Many," Dakota replied, "but all difficult in winter, requiring knowledge of the mountains." Black Fox raised an eyebrow at Sarah. "Time to implement your plan, White Sister." 3 days had transformed their relationship from suspicion to grudging respect. Black Fox had recognized Sarah's value as someone who understood their enemy's thinking, while she had come to appreciate his tactical brilliance. "Not yet," she cautioned. "First, we need to understand their intentions and timeline." "They come with soldiers and weapons," Black Fox retorted. "Their intentions seem clear. Thornton is a businessman first," Sarah explained. "He'll attempt negotiation before violence. It's less expensive and risky. We need to know how desperate he is, how close his deadline might be." Dakota considered this. "How do we discover this without approaching them?" "We let them come to us," Sarah said, "but not all the way to the village." By dusk, their plan was in motion. A small hunting party made themselves deliberately visible to Thornton's scouts, then disappeared into a narrow canyon that provided excellent defensive positions. As expected, a detachment of soldiers followed, led by Lieutenant Harding. From her concealed position on the canyon rim, Sarah watched the soldiers advance cautiously into the natural trap. Beside her, Dakota remained utterly still, bow ready but not yet drawn. Around them, 20 warriors waited in perfect silence. When the last soldier entered the canyon, Black Fox gave the signal. Warriors rose from hiding places, arrows nocked and aimed. Below, the soldiers froze at the sight of certain death raining from above. "Lieutenant Harding," Sarah called clearly. "We meet again." Harding's face contorted with rage when he spotted her. "Miss Calloway, are you being coerced?" "I suggest you focus on your current situation, Lieutenant," she replied coolly. "Your men are surrounded, outmaneuvered, and one signal away from death." The soldiers shifted nervously, some reaching for weapons until Dakota's sharp command stilled them. The message required no translation. "Move and die. What do you want?" Harding demanded. "Information," Sarah answered. "Mr. Thornton has gone to extraordinary lengths to find me." "I want to know why," Harding laughed bitterly. "You're his fiancée. Isn't that reason enough?" "We both know better," Sarah countered. "Tell me about the European contracts. When must they be executed to remain valid?" Surprise flickered across Harding's face before his expression hardened. "I'm not privy to Mr. Thornton's business affairs." "Lieutenant," Sarah said evenly, "I suggest you reconsider your answer. My Apache brothers have shown remarkable restraint thus far, but their patience has limits," as if to emphasize her point. Several warriors drew their bowstrings tighter. "The end of February," Harding blurted, his professional composure cracking. "The consortium requires either your signature or certificate of death by then, or the contracts revert to the original European partners." Satisfaction coursed through Sarah. "February's end, barely 3 weeks away, and the artillery you've brought?" she pressed. "Seems excessive for a rescue mission." Harding's jaw tightened. "Mr. Thornton anticipated resistance and authorized you to attack a peaceful village?" Sarah demanded. "That's an act of war against people who've committed no crime. Harboring you could be construed as kidnapping an American citizen." Harding countered, "A convenient interpretation." Sarah observed coldly. A soldier's horse suddenly whinnied and reared, startled by a falling rock. The tension shattered. A nervous cavalryman fired his rifle, the shot echoing through the canyon. An Apache warrior loosed an arrow in response. Chaos erupted. Horses screamed, men shouted. The clang of metal and thud of arrows filled the air. Dakota grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her back from the rim as the skirmish below intensified. "We must go," he urged. More soldiers will come when they hear fighting. They retreated swiftly through the forest, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Black Fox and several warriors covered their withdrawal, ensuring no one pursued. When they reached the designated meeting point, Sarah leaned against a tree, heart pounding. "That wasn't supposed to happen!" she gasped. No one was supposed to get hurt. "First blood is often spilled by accident," Dakota said grimly. "But once spilled, more follows." The remaining warriors rejoined them gradually, carrying captured weapons and supplies. One held a brass cavalry bugle, displaying it as a trophy. Another reported soberly that 3 soldiers had died, with 2 Apache warriors wounded but alive. Thornton will use this to justify a full attack now, Sarah realized, the weight of responsibility crushing. "Those men's deaths are on my hands." Dakota turned her to face him, his hands firm on her shoulders. "No, their blood is on Thornton's hands. He brought weapons against a peaceful people." As they made their way back to the village, Sarah clutched the crucial information they'd gained. 3 weeks until Thornton's deadline. 3 weeks to outlast him, or outmaneuver him. But with blood already spilled, she feared those weeks would feel like an eternity. Behind them, a soldier's bugle sounded in the distance, not the retreat they'd hoped for, but the unmistakable call for reinforcements. The next morning brought heavy snowfall and an unexpected visitor to the village perimeter. A lone rider approached through the swirling white, a makeshift white flag attached to his rifle barrel. The scouts reported it was Thornton himself, unarmed except for a sidearm, requesting parley. "It's a trap," Black Fox insisted as the council debated. "He comes to locate our defenses." "He comes because he has no choice," Sarah countered. 3 of his men are dead, and he faces a deadline. "He needs me alive or confirmed dead within 3 weeks. Walking Thunder studied her thoughtfully. "You wish to meet with this man?" "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "Under proper protection and on our terms." Dakota had remained silent throughout the discussion, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke. "I will accompany her." "No others." "Too dangerous," Black Fox objected. "If Thornton wanted simple violence, he would attack, not negotiate," Dakota reasoned. "He seeks something more valuable than revenge." In the end, the council agreed. Sarah would meet Thornton at a neutral location with Dakota as her sole protector. While warriors maintained hidden positions nearby, they selected a flat, open area equidistant between the Apache village and Thornton's camp. Sarah, dressed in a mixture of her Apache clothing and salvaged pieces from her original attire, a visual statement of her dual identity. Dakota wore his finest ceremonial vest, but carried his weapons openly. Edward Thornton awaited them atop a magnificent black stallion, the white handkerchief now held in his gloved hand. He was younger than Sarah had expected, perhaps 35, handsome in a severe way, with sharp features and calculating eyes beneath his expensive fur hat. "Miss Calloway," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "I cannot express my relief at seeing you alive after these many months." "Mr. Thornton," Sarah acknowledged coolly. "This is my husband, Dakota." Thornton's smile tightened at the introduction. "A temporary arrangement, I'm sure, born of necessity. Rest assured, once you're safely returned to civilization, any such entanglement can be legally dissolved. I have no intention of returning with you," Sarah stated flatly, "nor of signing any contracts regarding my father's shipping business." The businessman's facade of concern cracked slightly. "I see the savages have poisoned your mind against your own people. Perhaps you're suffering from captivity delusions." "I know about the contracts, Mr. Thornton," Sarah interrupted. "Their February deadline, my father's suspicious death, your desperate need for either my signature or proof of my demise." Thornton's expression hardened. "Business matters can be discussed later, in proper surroundings. My current concern is your safety and well-being. 3 dead soldiers suggest otherwise." Dakota observed quietly. Thornton glanced at him dismissively before returning his attention to Sarah. "An unfortunate incident caused by misunderstanding. I've come to prevent further bloodshed by threatening a peaceful village with artillery." Sarah challenged. By offering generous terms, Thornton countered smoothly. He reached into his coat and extracted a folded document. I'm prepared to provide substantial compensation to your hosts. In exchange for your return, Sarah accepted the document without opening it. And if I refuse? Then I fear the military will have no choice but to interpret your situation as a hostage crisis. Thornton's voice remained pleasant despite the implicit threat. The Apache have a violent reputation. Colonel Hargrove at Fort Laramie has already authorized a full rescue operation. Dakota stepped forward slightly. You threaten war over business papers? For the first time, Thornton addressed Dakota directly. I threaten nothing, Savage. I merely state facts. Miss Calloway is an American citizen illegally detained by hostile Indians during a time of territorial tension. Her rescue is a military priority, and if she chooses to stay... Dakota pressed. Thornton's smile was cold. Then she must be dead or coerced, as no civilized woman would choose otherwise. Either scenario justifies military intervention. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach at the calculated cruelty of his position. Thornton had constructed a no-win situation. Either she returned with him voluntarily, or he would claim she was dead or captive. Using either as justification for attack. What if I were to sign your contracts here and now, she suggested, but remain with the Apache? Thornton raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by the offer. An interesting proposal. However, certain partners require your presence in Boston to verify authenticity. Convenient, Sarah observed bitterly. Business often is, Thornton agreed. You have until tomorrow noon to consider my terms. After that, the military will proceed as they see fit. He extended the white handkerchief toward her, a gesture that seemed both offering and challenge. A token to remember what awaits your return to civilization. Fine things, proper society, the life you were born to. Sarah accepted it automatically. The handkerchief was indeed fine, linen with a delicately embroidered crest. Yet it felt somehow tainted in her hands. I've already found the life I was meant for, she replied. Your deadline means nothing to me. Something dangerous flickered in Thornton's eyes. Perhaps not to you, Miss Calloway. But I wonder how many Apache lives you're willing to sacrifice for your principles. With that parting threat, he turned his horse and rode away, straight-backed and confident. Sarah watched him go, the white handkerchief clutched in her trembling hand. He will attack regardless of your decision, Dakota observed quietly. Yes, Sarah agreed. He needs me either compliant or confirmed dead. Nothing else serves his purpose. They returned to the village in troubled silence, the weight of Thornton's ultimatum hanging between them. Once inside their dwelling, Sarah tossed the handkerchief into the fire, watching as the fine fabric blackened and curled. We cannot fight the full military force, she said finally, but we cannot surrender either. Dakota studied her face in the firelight. What do you propose? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Something neither Thornton nor his soldiers will expect. A third path that uses his own deadline against him. As the white handkerchief turned to ash, Sarah outlined her desperate plan, one that would require perfect timing, absolute trust, and the most painful deception of all. Absolutely not. Dakota's voice was steel, his refusal echoing in the council lodge where Sarah had just outlined her plan. It is too dangerous. It's the only way, Sarah insisted. If I return to Thornton voluntarily, it buys the tribe time to relocate safely. And sacrifices you, Black Fox pointed out. Surprising everyone with his concern, the elders murmured among themselves, considering Sarah's proposal. Her plan was audacious, yet elegant in its simplicity. She would return to Thornton, apparently acquiescing to his demands, then delay signing the contracts through various means until his February deadline passed. Once the European agreements expired, his leverage would vanish, along with his reason to attack the Apache. I know Thornton's type, Sarah explained. He won't risk harming me while he still needs my signature. And he won't attack the village if he believes he's gotten what he wants. And after the deadline passes? Walking Thunder asked. When your signature no longer holds value? Sarah met the elder's eyes steadily. By then, I'll have arranged my escape. The fort will be busy with spring preparations, security more relaxed, or Thornton will eliminate you once you're no longer useful, Dakota countered, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. Morning Dove, who had remained silent throughout the debate, finally spoke. The pale woman offers her freedom for our safety. This is the way of family, of tribe. There must be another way, Dakota insisted, looking around the circle for support. What would you suggest? Black Fox challenged. Fight the soldiers with their own cannon turned against them? Outrun them through winter mountains with our children and elders? Her plan gives us what we need most: time. The council deliberated until dawn, weighing options, suggesting modifications to Sarah's plan. Throughout, Dakota remained adamantly opposed, his usual stoicism cracking under the strain of what she proposed. When the council finally dispersed, agreeing reluctantly to Sarah's strategy, Dakota stormed from the lodge without a word. Sarah found him later at the edge of the village, staring at the distant mountains gilded by morning light. "You're angry," she said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Yes." The single word contained volumes of emotion. "This is my choice." "Dakota, a choice that treats your life as less valuable than others." Sarah studied his profile, the strong lines of his face now tight with tension. "Isn't that what you did when you brought me to your village? Risked yourself for a stranger?" "That was different," he muttered. "How?" He turned to face her then, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that took her breath away. "Because I did not yet know you." "Did not yet?" He stopped abruptly, looking away. Sarah's heart quickened at what remained unspoken. After months of careful distance, the barriers between them were finally crumbling under the pressure of imminent separation. "I must finish preparing," she said softly. "I leave at midday, back in their dwelling." Sarah gathered the few possessions she would take: her father's watch, Morning Dove's gift of a small medicine pouch, and the obsidian arrowhead Dakota had made for her, now strung on a leather cord around her neck. On impulse, she reached for the deer-hide journal Morning Dove had given her months ago. Sarah had filled its pages with Apache vocabulary, sketches of plants and their uses, and increasingly personal reflections on her changing life and feelings. Now she wrote one final entry, a letter to Dakota that she could never speak aloud, explaining her decision and the emotions she had carefully guarded. "If you are reading this, I have not returned as planned. Know that I made this choice freely, not from obligation, but from love, for you and for the people who became my family. What began as a marriage of necessity became the most genuine bond I have ever known." Sarah continued writing, finally giving voice to feelings that had grown gradually over months of shared survival, mutual respect, and unspoken connection. When finished, she sealed the journal with sinew cord and placed it beneath her sleeping furs, where it would only be found if she failed to return. Midday approached too quickly. The tribe gathered to witness her departure, many offering small tokens of protection or remembrance. Morning Dove embraced her fiercely, whispering, "Your spirit is Apache now, whatever happens." Black Fox clasped her arm in warrior fashion. "Return to us, white sister. The mountains will not be the same without your stubborn questions." Sarah managed a smile at that. "Take care of him," she whispered, glancing toward Dakota, who stood apart from the others, still radiating disapproval. "He will not be easily managed," Black Fox warned. "But we will try." Finally, it was time. Sarah approached Dakota, painfully aware of the eyes watching them. Their marriage had begun as tribal spectacle. Now their parting shared the same public scrutiny. "I must go," she said simply. Dakota's expression remained stoic, but his eyes betrayed his turmoil. "If you are not back in 3 weeks, you will honor my choice," Sarah finished firmly. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might finally breach the careful distance they had maintained. Instead, he removed something from around his neck, a small leather pouch she had never seen before. "Medicine bundle," he explained gruffly, placing it in her hand. "Protection." Sarah closed her fingers around it, recognizing the significance of such a gift. "Thank you. Return to us," he said, so quietly only she could hear. The us became me in the depth of his gaze. With a final nod to the assembled tribe, Sarah turned and began walking toward Thornton's camp. Each step took tremendous will, her body rebelling against leaving the place and people that had become home. She did not look back, knowing that if she saw Dakota watching her go, her resolve might crumble entirely. Instead, she focused on the mission ahead, a dangerous game of deception and delay. With her life and the tribe's future hanging in the balance, Fort Laramie loomed before Sarah, its wooden walls and blockhouses stark against the winter landscape. After 2 days of tense travel with Thornton and his military escort, the trading post-turned-military installation represented a jarring return to civilization. Soldiers stared openly as Thornton led her through the gate, their expressions mixing curiosity and pity. Sarah maintained her composure despite her discomfort in the restrictive dress and shoes Thornton had insisted she wear. The Apache garments she'd grown accustomed to had been confiscated immediately, deemed savage attire unsuitable for a lady. "Your quarters," Thornton announced, gesturing to a small but well-appointed room in the officers' section. "I've arranged everything for your comfort while we conclude our business." Sarah noted the sturdy lock on the outside of the door. "Not quarters, a cell, however comfortable." "How thoughtful," she remarked dryly. "When will we discuss the contracts?" "All in good time," Thornton smiled thinly. "You've endured a terrible ordeal. Rest today. Tomorrow we'll begin reviewing the necessary documentation." 1 day already gained, Sarah thought. She needed to stretch this process as long as possible. "I'll need to understand everything thoroughly before signing," she said. "My father always taught me to read contracts carefully." Something cold flickered in Thornton's eyes. "Of course, I'd expect nothing less from William's daughter after he left." Sarah explored her confined space. A narrow bed, washing stand, small writing desk, and a window too small for escape but adequate for light. A female attendant brought meals and stood watch while Sarah bathed, clearly under instructions never to leave her alone. The next morning, Thornton arrived with a leather portfolio bulging with documents. "Shall we begin?" he suggested, laying out the contracts on the small desk. Sarah examined the first page, immediately overwhelmed by the dense legal terminology. "This references prior agreements I'm not familiar with," she observed. "I'll need to see those as well." "That could take some time to arrange," Thornton replied smoothly. "Those documents remain in Boston. Then I cannot in good conscience sign until I review them," Sarah countered. "My father would expect proper diligence." Irritation crossed Thornton's face before his mask of civility returned. "Perhaps we could address your specific concerns?" For the next several hours, Sarah questioned every clause, every term, requesting clarifications and expressing confusion over the simplest points. By day's end, Thornton's patience had visibly thinned, though they'd made minimal progress through the stack of documents. "We'll continue tomorrow," he said finally, gathering the papers. "Perhaps you'll find the terms clearer after reflection." 4 days passed in similar fashion. Sarah employed every delay tactic she could devise, requesting time to pray for guidance, developing a convenient headache, insisting on verifying details of her father's original agreements. Each day brought her closer to the deadline at February's end, now just 2 weeks away. On the 5th day, Thornton's strategy changed. He arrived with Lieutenant Harding and a different set of papers. "I grow concerned about your reluctance, Miss Calloway," Thornton said without preamble. "Perhaps these documents will prove more motivating." He placed a military report before her. Sarah scanned it with growing horror. It detailed plans for a punitive expedition against the Apache settlement. Citing hostile actions and necessary pacification, "The Apache have committed no hostile actions," she protested. "3 dead soldiers suggest otherwise," Thornton countered. "Colonel Hargrove has authorized this action regardless of your situation. However," he paused meaningfully, "as a significant contributor to the fort's supplies and a personal friend of the governor, my recommendation carries substantial weight. The threat was unmistakable. Sign the business contracts." or the military expedition proceeds. You're blackmailing me, Sarah stated flatly. Thornton smiled. I prefer to think of it as providing proper motivation. The Apache need not suffer for your stubbornness. After they left, Sarah paced her room in agitation. Thornton had outmaneuvered her, using the tribe rather than her personal safety as leverage. The expedition was scheduled for 3 days hence, long before the contract deadline she'd been working toward. That night, she removed Dakota's medicine bundle from its hiding place in her mattress, drawing strength from this tangible connection to him. Inside, she discovered something unexpected, a small, sharp flake of obsidian carefully wrapped in leather. A tool, a weapon, a means of escape. Hope flickered to life as Sarah formulated a new plan. She'd need to move quickly and take far greater risks than she'd anticipated. The window was too small for escape, but perhaps the attendant could be overcome, the lock manipulated. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened to reveal not her usual attendant, but Lieutenant Harding, his expression troubled. "Miss Calloway," he whispered urgently, "we must speak, but not here. Lives depend on it. Why should I trust you?" Sarah demanded. Harding glanced nervously down the hallway. "Because I've seen Thornton's true plans for the Apache, and because—" He hesitated. "Your husband saved my life after the canyon skirmish when he could have taken it instead." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Dakota let you live?" "He said blood called for blood, but mercy might yet bring peace," Harding replied. "I didn't understand then." "I do now." He extended his hand. "Please." "There isn't much time." With Dakota's medicine bundle clutched in her palm, Sarah made her decision and followed the lieutenant into the darkness. Lieutenant Harding led Sarah through the darkened fort with practiced stealth, avoiding the night sentries with ease. They slipped into the administrative building and down a narrow hallway to a small office lit by a single oil lamp. "Colonel Hargrove's dispatch office," Harding whispered. "We have minutes at most. Why are you helping me?" Sarah demanded, keeping her voice low. "You seemed quite dedicated to Thornton's cause before." Harding's expression hardened. "I was following what I believed were legitimate orders to rescue an American citizen. Since then, I've discovered Thornton has been manipulating military resources for private gain." He gestured to the dispatch box on the desk. "And I'm not the only one who's noticed." He unlocked the box with a key from his pocket, extracting several documents. "Colonel Hargrove received these communications yesterday from the territorial governor. Apparently, some of Thornton's business rivals in Boston have raised questions about his activities out west." Sarah scanned the documents quickly, her pulse quickening. "The European consortium is investigating him for fraud. And potentially your father's death," Harding added grimly. "The timing and circumstances have raised suspicions. Thornton's desperate to get your signature before any official inquiry reaches the territory." The implication struck Sarah like a physical blow. Her father's death, her arranged marriage, the attack on her wedding party, all potentially orchestrated by Thornton to secure the shipping contracts. "The colonel suspects Thornton's involvement, but lacks proof," Harding continued. "And Thornton's political connections make direct action risky without evidence. What about the military expedition against the Apache?" "Still scheduled," Harding confirmed, though the colonel has privately expressed concerns about its legitimacy. Thornton is pushing hard, claiming the Apache are harboring raiders who attacked settlements downriver. "That's a lie," Sarah said fiercely. "They've remained in their winter camp for months." "I believe you," Harding assured her. "But we need more than denials to stop the expedition," Sarah thought quickly. "These documents prove Thornton is under investigation. Isn't that enough?" "For delay, perhaps, but not cancellation." Harding hesitated. "There's something else. Something I witnessed that could incriminate Thornton directly, but my word alone won't stand against his influence." "What did you see?" "The night before we found you, Thornton met privately with men I now believe were the same bandits who attacked your wagon train." Harding's voice dropped even lower. "I overheard him say no survivors and mention making it look like an Apache raid." Ice formed in Sarah's stomach. You're suggesting he ordered the attack? That he wanted me dead? I believe he wanted you compliant or deceased, Harding said bluntly. Either would serve his purposes with the contracts. But a rebellious, questioning heir to Callaway Shipping would not. A sound in the hallway startled them both. Harding quickly returned the documents to the dispatch box, locking it. "We need to leave," he whispered urgently. "Meet me tomorrow at the sutler's store. I have a plan, but we'll need help." They slipped out a side door just as voices approached the office. Sarah followed Harding's lead, ducking behind supply crates and staying in shadows until they reached a secluded corner of the fort. "The Apache camp," Sarah said breathlessly. "We need to warn them about the expedition." "Already done," Harding replied, surprising her. "I sent a trusted Shoshone scout 2 days ago after seeing Thornton's true plans. Your husband will be prepared." Relief washed through Sarah, followed quickly by suspicion. "Why would you do that?" Harding's expression turned somber. "My father was an Indian agent in Minnesota. He treated the tribes fairly, respected their sovereignty. For that, he was branded a savage sympathizer and relieved of his position." He met Sarah's eyes directly. "I joined the cavalry believing I could make a difference from within. Instead, I've found myself enforcing policies I cannot morally defend." Sarah studied him, weighing his sincerity. "If you're discovered helping me, court-martial at minimum," Harding acknowledged grimly. "Why risk it?" "Because your husband showed mercy when he had every right to take vengeance. Because Thornton uses the army as his private militia. Because some debts can only be paid through action." Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky lightening perceptibly. They needed to part before the fort awakened. "Tomorrow at the sutler's store," Harding confirmed. "We'll need to move quickly once we act." The expedition leaves at first light the day after. As Sarah slipped back to her quarters, her mind raced with possibilities. Harding was a risky ally, but perhaps their only chance to prevent bloodshed. Thornton's schemes were unraveling, but like any cornered predator, that made him more dangerous, not less. In her room, she removed Dakota's medicine bundle again, pressing it to her heart. The obsidian tool it contained now represented not just escape, but justice for her father, for herself, and for the Apache who had become her true family. Outside her window, the fort was coming alive with morning activities. Soldiers drilled in the yard, preparing for an expedition based on lies. Somewhere in the officers' quarters, Thornton plotted his next move. Unaware that his carefully constructed plan was beginning to collapse, Sarah tucked the medicine bundle back into its hiding place, a new determination filling her. She had entered Fort Laramie as a pawn in Thornton's game. She would leave it as the architect of his downfall. 5 years passed like the changing seasons, each bringing new challenges, new joys, and deeper bonds between Sarah and the people she now called family, without reservation. The Apache village had flourished in its new location deeper in the mountains, far from the expanding reach of white settlements. The confrontation that might have destroyed them had been averted through an unlikely alliance and Sarah's own courage. On this bright spring morning, Sarah sat outside her dwelling, larger now and built with Dakota's hands, watching their 3-year-old daughter play with the other children. Little Morning Star had her father's dark eyes and her mother's determined spirit, already showing signs of bridging the two worlds of her heritage. "She grows stronger each day," Dakota observed, settling beside Sarah on the bench. His hand found hers naturally, their fingers intertwining as they had countless times since their reunion. "Like her father," Sarah replied with a smile. Her Apache now as fluent as her English. Dakota's thumb brushed over the silver and obsidian ring on her finger, the matching pair to his own, crafted during the desperate days of their separation 5 years before. "The trading party returns," he noted, nodding toward the trail where riders approached. "Black Fox brings news from the settlements." Their life had found a delicate balance, maintaining Apache traditions while establishing careful trade relationships with select white merchants. Black Fox, once Sarah's greatest skeptic, had become their most effective emissary to the changing world beyond the mountains. Sarah rose as the riders entered the village, spotting a familiar figure among them, Lieutenant Harding, now a civilian in trader's garments. Their unlikely ally had resigned his commission after the events at Fort Laramie, choosing to work as a liaison between tribes and honest settlements. "Sarah," Harding greeted her warmly as he dismounted. "Dakota, the valley looks prosperous this spring." "Our harvests have been good," Dakota acknowledged. "And your journeys?" "Productive." Harding reached into his saddlebag, extracting a newspaper. "I thought you might want to see this." Sarah unfolded the Boston Herald, her breath catching at the headline, "Thornton convicted of fraud. Suspected in Callaway death. Justice comes slowly." "But it comes," Harding observed. The newspaper detailed Edward Thornton's downfall, his fraudulent shipping schemes exposed, his political connections insufficient to save him from prison. The article mentioned evidence provided by cavalry witnesses and recovered documents that had proven decisive in his conviction. What remained unwritten was the true story of how those documents had been secured. Sarah and Harding's desperate plot at Fort Laramie, the confrontation in Thornton's quarters, the colonel's eventual decision to stand against corruption rather than enable it, the territorial governor's intervention that had halted the military expedition just hours before its departure, and most significantly, Dakota's arrival with 30 warriors to support Sarah's claims, standing proud before the fort's commander to present evidence of Thornton's collusion with the bandits who had attacked the wagon train. "It seems another chapter closes," Sarah said. "Folding the newspaper and your father's company?" Harding inquired. "Restored to legitimate management under the European Consortium," Sarah replied. "As I wished. Some battles are not worth fighting." She had signed limited documents transferring her ownership rights while retaining certain protections, a compromise that freed her from Boston entanglements while ensuring her father's legacy wouldn't be corrupted. Later, after Harding and Black Fox had departed to distribute the traded goods, Sarah and Dakota walked to their special place, a high outcropping overlooking the valley, where they had renewed their marriage vows by choice rather than necessity after her return. "Do you ever regret it?" Dakota asked quietly, the question he posed once each year on this anniversary. "The life you might have had?" Sarah looked out over the mountains that had once seemed so hostile and now felt like home. She thought of Morning Star playing with her cousins, of the respect she had earned within the tribe, of the man beside her who had transformed from stranger to protector to the great love of her life. "Never," she answered honestly. "My father once told me that home isn't a place, but where your heart finds peace." Dakota's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close. "And has yours found peace, Sarah of Two Worlds?" She turned within his embrace, reaching up to trace the lines of his face, still proud and strong, but now so beloved and familiar. "It found more than peace," she murmured. "It found where it belongs." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, they remained together on the outcropping, watching the shadows lengthen across the valley. Two people from worlds that should have remained forever separate, yet had found in each other the completion neither had known they sought. The Apache alpha who hadn't seen a woman in a decade. The Boston bride who had lost everything only to find a greater treasure. Bound not by circumstance now, but by choice, by respect, and by a love that had proven stronger than the forces that sought to tear it apart.